Let's get started, everybody. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Karen Edwards, and I'm the COO at Roofer's Coffee Shop, and you are joining us for our second RLW of 2023. And I'm really excited for today's session because we're going to be talking with Kenney of Cotney Consulting Group about how roofing companies are finding success navigating the ongoing labor shortage and retaining team members through their field leadership training programs. So John, welcome. It sure is nice to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's always great to start out in January with doing anything with Roofer's Coffee Shop. So I'm really happy that I'm here to do this and get the year started out right. Well, actually, it's the second one, but just February. I forgot February 1st.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get going, starting talking about this topic, but I do want to remind everyone that this is being recorded and it will be available on Roofer's Coffee Shop on demand. So you can revisit it or share with anyone who maybe isn't here who you feel would benefit from this. I also want to, well, John, let's introduce you because you are certainly well known in the industry. You have an extensive career in roofing, and you've pretty much experienced it and seen it all. So share a little bit of information about yourself.
Well, I appreciate that intro. Yeah, I mean, this is in my blood. I'm actually third generation. My grandfather originally started in a roofing company back in 1922. I had the pleasure of working with him at his very older end of his career, and then my dad and myself. I like to say I started out doing pretty much all of it because I did. I mean, when you're in a family business, anyone out there in a family business knows that you're sweeping warehouses, you're painting trucks, you're changing, well, in those days, transmissions, whatever it took, but worked all the way up through there. But this is why I love the topic we're on today is training and production, because no matter what I did in different aspects of my career, the most rewarding was being able to really produce a high quality on-time project and, have a crew that you could be proud of. And it kind of felt more like a sports team atmosphere back when I first started than compared to what I see. So, that's why I love to share knowledge and talk about what we do. And you're right, I've been in this a long time, and hopefully I'll be in it a whole lot longer. Look forward to seeing everybody for the next couple decades.
Well, thank you for being here today and for sharing your wisdom that will hopefully help others be successful. And before we dive in, I just want to remind everyone, feel free to use the chat. We would love to hear where you're from, maybe whether you do roofing or residential or commercial roofing. Share that information. If you have questions while we're going along, we'll be taking a look at the chat to try to get those questions answered. So let's get started. John, you have, we hear all the time, oh, there's a labor shortage, and people are struggling, but what does this mean? Let's look at some of the numbers that you have.
Yeah, so I like to really break these down. And again, if anyone out there knows me, I'm a huge fan of data and statistics, in history, right? They really give you a look ahead of where you're going, where we're at, where we've been. So employment of roofers, you look at, we know we're down, the construction industry, you hear figures, maybe 1 million jobs throughout. And what are we really down in roofing? 15, 20,000 a year, according to, labor statistics. Honestly, I think a lot of that is bunk. We are probably down more than most people want to admit. The roofers that I just did a couple surveys with over the last 6 months, from size of companies of $1 million and to 5 million in revenue up to, over 100 million in revenue. No one answered they could use less than 5 to 10 workers, and most of them were above 20. This is just in the field. So if you take that and multiply that out as a base of what we took in the industry, I think roofing, we're probably right now could put 500,000 more people to work throughout our industry, in not just in the roofing contractor, but manufacturing and truck driving and everything involved with it. So it's very big. And again, retainment issues, it's kind of a interesting way when you look at retainment. A lot of people come in to the industry and they start out and they leave within the first almost 30 days. There's still a large percentage. And a lot of that, when you talk to the companies and they do their outgoing surveys and their questionnaires, it's because, well, I didn't think it was this hard, or I didn't know I'd have to climb a ladder. You do get reasons like that. But there's that group that leaves. That's not so concerning. That's a percentage that's going to happen in any industry. But it's the ones that leave after 90 days to that 6 months. And usually what we hear there in those areas is, well, I don't want to just pick up a broom for the rest of my career. I don't know what, no one, I feel outed on the crew. And these are the answers that I've heard, throughout my career, and I continue to hear. So retainment, we have to work on, because we already know that we cannot get the amount of workers that we need. There's not much we're going to do to change that. I think the country, regardless, even if we went into some sort of a recession, the workload is there. It's always been there. Roofer, you always do well, whether it's bad times or good times. For the most part, it averages out. Then on top of that, we have our aging workforce. So we're going to go into a little bit more in the stats here in a minute, but your baby boomers are retiring out, and you have a certain portion of your Gen X's that are within 10 years of a good portion of that generation aging out. So this is not going to be fulfilled or in there with another generation. We're going to probably lose another 15 to 20% of the existing workforce within the next 5 years, maybe 10 at the maximum. So that's happening. There's no way around it. You can only work so long out in the field, and you get ready. And when you're at retirement age, you're going to retire. So trade schools and roofing, I really love that topic, because I know that our industry, our organizations and a lot of individuals working within them are really doing a superb effort to try to make this better, right? They really are, and they're working hand in hand. But again, I think it's been so many years that this has been lagged behind, or we haven't even been included in the trade schools, which you see now. If you go to trade schools even today, there's very few that even acknowledge roofing is a trade to go into. We're kind of really a stepchild again. But I think we're behind the curve enough. We got to keep those efforts up. Please, anyone out there that is pounding that drum, you keep pounding it, because we need to. But again, I think we got to change not only what we're doing. I think the country and the culture on a whole needs to come behind this and really have some sort of a movement to say it's okay not to go to school and to go into the trades. And it's even okay if you want to go into the trades and go to night school, do a 2-year. And it's okay if you go into the trades for 5 years and then go to school. We want to make it so it's part of, the entire system, and not either or type of road, which I think that's what it's come down to. So that's kind of my summation of those areas there.
Yeah, there are some organizations that are really working hard. The NRCA and the Roofing Alliance have put together the student competition for construction management programs to expose those construction management students to roofing, which many of them haven't even considered as a trade. They all think they're going to go work for a general contractor. And they don't know about the opportunities in roofing. So I think it's really important that we continue to support that message. And if anybody's going to the IRE in March in Dallas next month, the student competition will be happening there Wednesday. Would love to see some faces out there supporting these students.
Exactly. And that's a great point. That's what I, was alluding to here. You just can't leave it as an industry up to NRCA or to groups to do this. We all got to take that message that and you're right, the message is so much better than it was. But if we're not out there on a local level, right? If you have a local trade school in your area, you need to go over and say, hey, what about roofing? What does it take to get it moving? Here's the people to talk to get you rolling. That's what I mean. And that has to continue. It's just that, unfortunately or unfortunately, it's like anything else. And it's not, when I say we, it's construction on a whole. It's manufacturing. I just saw a great article I shared on LinkedIn. CBS interviewed him, and Mike Rowe was part of the interview. There's 5.5 million young men between the ages of 25 and 53 that left the workforce. And it's not that they just left to go collect unemployment. Yeah, part of that is there's program, but they don't know what to do, right? That's going to be a huge problem 10 years down the road, because they're not going to be available to even fill the gaps that we're talking about here with retirement and aging workforce.
Yeah, I saw that interview too. So let's talk about what's the new look of field crews, because it's not like it used to be, right, John?
No, it's not. And surprisingly, there's a few things that I found. So where I've got these from, I went and pulled these out of, the last two census to see where these go. Because if you really take the time to go through the census, there's a lot of information in there. It's not the easiest always to get, but when you look at it. So let's talk about the makeup of gender first. We talk about there's about 10% now women in a construction industry compared to where it was. But when you break that down, there's only less than 2% in actually out in the field, in the workforce. So yes, industry-wise, things are getting up, but still, where we need the people the most right now is in the field. Is still not much of it's still better 2% than 0%, but there's a lot of room for growth. And I think, again, that comes to what we're talking about, trade schools and everything else to do it. So right now, we're looking at the workforce is 97.8% male. This is in the field, right? So that really hasn't changed too much. Age by sex, which I thought was kind of interesting, 98% to 2%. The average age is pretty close, within 5 decimal points, and it's not even worth to talk about. 37.1 years, roughly, right now to 38, right? Depending on which one survey you look at, statistics, you're there. So the age is going up. I mean, it's been in low 30s and it's been up to high 30s, but as we start to retire out, the age may actually lower a little bit, but that's not going to improve the fact that the jobs filling positions aren't there. So now jump down to the race breakup. So this I found interesting, because this has actually switched a little bit. So 36% of your workforce in roofing is still white, non-Hispanic. Now let's just look at that for a minute. Out of that 36%, you're probably looking at 40% of that particular demographic is ready to retire. So that's going to flip real quick, right? So you got about 32% is Hispanic in the workforce. So it's not as high. Everybody, I know a lot of people, and I've talked to, think that our workforce is 80% Hispanic. This is overall. So there's still a pretty good mix, but you still now have a third of our workforce that is made up of all kinds of races and different ethnic groups and different areas of the world and culture. So there's quite a diversity. It's almost a third and a third when you think about it. So that's challenges, again, that we have to look at and face. I think the age thing, when you look at the median age, I think it's high, 37, and I'll tell you why. When I started and I came in the 70s, late 70s, working in the roofing out in the field, we always wanted to be inside or move into a supervisory position by our early to mid 30s, right? We're going to give it our all. That's what was a group, all of us coming in that generation, give it our all and work. But at some point, we know that our bodies are going to perform less and less every year. Now, there's examples out there. I know there's a lot of proud roofers on this here today where you can work long into different ages, but overall, the averages are there. And I know that's some of the things we're going to get into in a little bit on career paths, which I think is very important.
Yeah, so like you said, things are getting a little bit more diverse. A third, as you mentioned. So that's going to affect the culture. And I think one of the ways that you can address culture in a company is through training. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so dedicated messaging is important. And again, a shout out to what you said earlier, NRCA and the different groups getting a better message, because this one floored me. If anyone goes to our U.S. Department of Labor for statistics and looks up roofing as a career, and I want to just take a minute and read this because I don't want to get it wrong. This is quote right off their website. Employment of roofers is projected to show little or no change from 21 to 31. And I think that is not because the industry can't grow. they're using the statistics that we can't get people, so they don't expect to change, right? But right under that, it says, despite limited employment growth. So they're telling you there's no career path in roofing. That's really what that means. About 15,000 openings for roofers are projected each year on average over the next decade. So they're saying we're 150 low over 10 years. But they say most of these openings are expected as a result to replace workers who transfer to other occupations or they exit the labor force, such as retirement or just leave. That is really a garbage message for our industry right on our Department of Labor. So I've already sent them an email because that really kind of teed me off. Government won't listen to me anymore than they do anything else. But again, we can't control that. I wish we could, but we want to make sure that we have a better message. If you're a company, you want to have a good message. You want to get away from roofing's hard. You can't deny that. Roofing's hard. It's labor intensive, long hours, but it is extremely rewarding. And I can say that because I came up through it. That's all I've done my entire career, right? I loved it. I do it all over again. People say, would you do the same thing? Heck yeah, I do the same thing. I love this industry. So we got to get a good dedicated message. That's the start of getting the culture going. Part of that message has got to be a career path, which I know we'll get in. That's kind of at the end, but you got to include that. Where am I going to go if I come for you? What do I expect out of your company? What are you doing? And then, dedicated time. We spend in our industry, and we have to, a lot of time on safety training, and we have to. There's nothing more important than being safe and going home every night in a safety culture. But imagine if we took that same amount of time, money, and effort and put that into actually training the culture of leadership, right? So we're talking about leadership in our field so that people are trained how to do things, how to talk to other people, how to run crews, how to mentor. And then again, you've got to have a promotion within the company, career paths, and how to get there. People love to see people promoted from within their company. There's nothing that you will get more of a standing applause at any one of your safety meetings when you can announce that you took Fred and he's been working at your company for 10 years and you've trained him, he's ready to go. Fred and Jose and Sam, they all get to go start their own crew, right? That is what really keeps people going and really, gets the juices flowing in that part of our industry.
Yeah, it does. It sets an example too for the newer or younger people when they see that happening. They say, oh, well, that happened for them, then I can probably do the same thing as I progress through my career, which takes us right into our next, you mentioned leadership training.
Yep.
That's really important.
So, leadership training really, it's not that it's not available. It's available. It's available through organizations, again, RCA. It's available through, private enterprises such as ourselves and other people that are out there, right? It's there. It's available to companies that have been doing this internally for 100 years. They know how to do it, right? But we're just so busy on other aspects of our industry and our company. I can tell you we're not putting enough effort into this internally. Because really, it does not matter what's available to use as a training aid if you don't actually apply it and use it, right? And I know I hear a lot, well, if we train, what do we do if they leave? Imagine, what do you do if they stay, right? The whole idea is to get them to stay. And I will tell you whether it is an admin employee or it is a field employee, honestly, most people do not just leave for the single dollar. Yes, there are roofers that will hop from company to company for more money because they don't feel there's any way they can better themselves. So they got to take advantage of the extra dollar or two an hour to better their family. And you can't blame them for that. That's just part of getting ahead in life. But if you have that path there and you empower them, right? So really, what does empowerment mean? Let's talk about our field crew leaders or foremen. I love to call them crew leaders because one, it doesn't matter who you are, but it's a better term. Foreman, it's an older term. I like crew leader. That means you're leading something, right? You're empowering. So I love using that term. So what you want to do is you need to bring them into the fold and make sure they understand how the roofing business works, right? That should be part of the training, and how they can mentor and work with their crews, how to do all this and understand production and efficiency and all the things that go along that they've never really been taught. And I know they weren't taught it because they didn't teach it even when I came through. You kind of was a touch and feel and work your way through it. And this one I love, understanding the culture. If you walk out into your shop area at a meeting, every single person there should be able to tell you if you're doing a good job at understanding the culture in a company. Everyone there should be able to answer the questions. What is our purpose? Vision and mission statements kind of get lost a little bit, but you do have to have a purpose, right? So what is that? And especially, what are your core values? I know there's companies out there that are probably on here today. You can ask anybody employed with them and they can knock it out like that, what their core values. If you can't get 100% response, then you've got people that don't understand what you're about and what your culture is. So it's very hard for them to become leaders and get your message out there. Last but not least on this is create a clear career path, right? And I've spoke at, I did speak at IRE, and I've spoke at other events on this about empowering your field leaders. And one of the things we talk about in there is that it still works today, even better than it probably did years ago. There has to be a point where you get a crew that is really good at training and mentoring, that they know that crew's got to be broken up. That's the way life goes, right? You get a lead person up, they eventually want to become a foreman, a crew leader, and you want to be able to take some of the good trained off of there, move them to the other crew so you can build. With putting that process together correctly and spending the time and training, both in leadership and other skills, as well as actually roofing skills of how to put it down, you cannot have to worry about recruiting as many people externally. You can build internally because they will bring people in through recruitment and so on. So, but you got to know what it is. What is my path? If I, I'm going to ask you the question, Mr. Roofing Contractor, right now, if I come into work for you and I know how to roof or I don't know how to roof, if I don't know, how are you going to teach me? How long is it going to take? When are we going to get there? What is our process? And really, am I going to be on, am I only ever going to be able to be in the field in your company? Or is there room, if I work hard and accept all the training that's out there and what you have, can I eventually move into other positions in the company and advance my career? If your answer is to me, you don't know, or yeah, we'll talk about it, you don't have a clear path. Clear path doesn't mean you have to have a great video or brochures that explain it. When you're onboarding someone or interviewing for a job, you should be able to tell them how your company flows. Be honest, you might be in the field for 10 years before this happens, but that's where there's a way to roll you in. I think those are great questions to ask yourself, and then it'll kind of give you a good checkpoint where you're at.
Yeah, I think when there is a clear path, that contributes so much to retaining who you have on your team, because they can see that future, that they may want to move into estimating, they may want to move into sales, and that there's an opportunity for them to do that. I think that's one of the most important things. Thank you, John.
Well, jumping off of what you said, estimating, that's great. Your crew leaders should be taught a certain part of estimating. They should know how to break a job down. They should know how many squares they need to get in a day. They should know how to load it, what the coverage is, so not too much is there. They also should know how to track their labor. This shouldn't be up to what I like to call the superintendent or project management babysitters. We need to get them away from being babysitters, let them do their jobs, and empower the people that are on that job site every single day with what they need to do their jobs better.
Right. There's more to it than just installing the material. Like you said,
Yep.
show them how the business itself operates and help them understand that. I think that's a key point. So let's talk about multilingual training, because, with that diverse group that we have now coming into the industry, there are multiple languages being spoken.
Yeah, there are, and depending, wherever anybody may be on this call, and it's Spanish, not necessarily is the only language. I know there's parts of the country where training in Spanish may not be a concern because they may have, Eastern European languages, Russian, different language from around the parts of the world, depending where it is. And, Heidi and I talked about this the other day, getting ready to do this. Spanish is a tough one too. And I know I've talked to some people that actually train in Spanish because there's so many different dialects. So if you do invest in training that is in Spanish, I don't know the proper term of this, but you kind of want that almost neutral type Spanish training that, most of the people that, may be taking it will understand to get through it. But I still think in today's day and age, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I know we talked about this even on different committees like RT3, and that you can definitely, as long as you have a lot of one-on-one and verbal communication, there's usually somebody in your company that can be that go-between to get that message, even if it is only available in English training, to be able to take that and get it to somebody that the rest of the crew that maybe they don't speak English, and that's what the training's in. So as invest in it. There are trainings in other languages out there. It's really company dependent on what you really need, depending on what your workforce is. But I think today, and jumping off a little bit, but fortunately or unfortunately, we see negatives and positives on AI, but AI is making it a lot easier to get these, programs translated into different languages, and they're really getting better at it. So hopefully technology continues to stay ahead of the curve for us.
They are. I like your comment, a picture is worth 1,000 words, because we've talked about this before, where somebody calls this piece this A and somebody else refers to it as B, and you send somebody to run to the shop to pick up what they think is this, and they get the wrong thing, and that's a lot of wasted time back and forth. And the same goes, in training. The best you can speak the same language and visually communicate, the better off you'll be.
Definitely, and it jumps into terminologies. That's probably another double-edged sword in our industry, like many industries. But your other industries, like the trade schools we talked about, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, they do have a lot of standardized terminologies, and most of it is standardized. And a lot of that is because of like electrical and plumbing and HVAC, you have to have a license in all 50 states, where in roofing, you don't. So therefore, we have a lot of regionalized and local terminology, which makes training can be very difficult at times. I get that, especially on training systems, and you may get used to calling it one thing and not know what it is in another area. When you get people moving in and changing around. So I think the best thing to do in terminologies, again, that is where a picture is worth 1,000 words. Everyone's going to take a look at event pipe stack, and whether you call it stink pipe or the other 1,000 terms I've heard of from it out there, you're going to know what it is by looking at it. Love to see standardization of terms. I know there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. We've looked at it as well. Some of the groups that I'm on. Hopefully we get there. I think we're starting to push. And then the multi-language considerations, again, just jumping back on that, depending on the part of your country you're in, is what language barriers you're going to face getting it in. So that being said, I know we have a lot of questions, it looks like.
And we've got a lot of conversation.
That's great. Well, one thing I want to jump back on is when we're talking about the trade schools, I want to just jump off a little bit and give you a personal experience with this. Both of my daughters, God bless them, they're teachers. In today's day and age, that is a great thing. I really never, and I'll say this openly, I never had the ultimate respect for the teaching profession as I do when I see now what my two daughters have to go through each and every day to make this happen, and they love their jobs, and that's great. One is in middle school and one is in high school, and it's in a low income area, right? And it's it's got its issues like a lot of other areas do. You talk about taking this to the local level. Their guidance counselors and that, they heard us. I talked to them, other contractors in the area talked to them. They know there's an option in the trades, and more importantly, they know there's an option in roofing. Guess what? A lot of those kids are now coming in to the industry. Some of them go to the technical school to learn more. Some of them come right in. But when you can get a one-on-one with a high school student and explain to them the type of money that they can make without having a mound of debt face them right away, and there is a true career path out there for them, I think locally, you can really help your companies out by going to that grassroots effort and getting into your local schools yourself and start to do your own recruiting programs. But by this experience, I see it works. And I think you can do it yourself too.
There was a good question asked from Lynn about you being involved in some international associations. And are you seeing other countries struggling with the same things we are with, an aging workforce, young people not coming in? And is there something that they are doing that maybe we could learn from, or maybe just share your experience with that?
Sure. So United States, in comparison to even Canada, Canada has, a national training program, Red Seal. If you're a journeyman roofing to work in the trades up there, you got to become a Red Seal in most of the provinces to be able to work. But they have a lot of grants behind it, and they're still facing a labor shortage, and they're still facing similar to us. But I think their avenue on a national basis is a lot easier to get the flow coming in from the high school level and that level in the 20s that we're all looking for. Now, let's jump over to Europe. That's an interesting one. And I work with the IFD, and I'm a member of the IFD, and I'm on 2 commissions over there. Yeah, Europe has probably some of the best trade apprenticeship programs in the world. There's no doubt about that. Once you work with them one-on-one, very high skill, very high training. Great Britain has their own through the Institute of Roofing training, including project management and all that. And it's almost more like a school atmosphere than it is an organization trying to provide training. But yes, they're facing the same thing. They're facing an aging workforce. They're facing a shortage. So one of the things that they're doing in Europe, which, I find very interesting, is they have, it's called, and I don't know what it is in German or how they actually call it, but basically it's roofers talking to mothers in kindergarten. They are actually going all the way back and speaking to the incoming generations in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and letting the mothers know that it's not unsafe to let their children, male or female, this is not a single gender, that there is a great trade in roofing. And yes, you do climb. Yes, you do this, but it's a proud, we're going to teach you to do it. And they're starting to get some traction on that. Of course, it's going to take a few years to see how well it really works because you're hitting them young. But that's why, we were talking about here. I don't think you can go young enough. We need to start getting the culture to change with our young folks coming up, that this is a really viable trade to be in. So I think in summation of that question, I think the only thing we're probably lacking compared to the other is an easy governmental support of training in the trades. Okay. That's why I want to put the quotations around it, because anyone out there knows there's a lot of strings attached to a lot of programs. Anything our government has their hands on, where they're a little bit easier in some of the other countries to get people in and involved and get the local contractors able to do it on local levels. So, short answer is yes, it is a worldwide problem. People are just not coming, they're going in. It's kind of like the Industrial Revolution, right? Went from agricultural to industrial. I think we've seen a big switch from people not so much interested in the trades to go into other fields. But I think the savior to that, I'm going off here a little bit, is technology is going to be a big part of our industry in a few years. Robotics is going to be huge. 3D printing is going to be huge. So we need to be ready for that to still keep those young folks coming in to be able to run those technologies that we're going to need.
That's a good point. I mean, the younger generation has grown up with technology. They've grown up with smartphones, with computers and the internet. And the more we can show the technology that goes into a roofing business and the roofing industry, the more attractive it's going to be to that generation. I also want to mention that NRCA has some children's books written by Karen Cates in both English and Spanish that talk about roofing as a career. So if you've got any youngins on your birthday or Christmas list, you might want to check those books out.
We should all be buying them and hand them out in the schools. That's what we should do. I think that's great.
Yeah. Okay, so oops, did I skip a slide here? I think I did, John. Let me back up. Oh, no, I didn't. All right, let's talk about it's one thing to say, yes, I know we need to train, we're going to train. How do you like make it a habit to keep it going? Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, so if you really want to be you really want to be serious about this, again, I want you to look at it like safety training. You have to have somebody dedicated to be in charge of doing this in your company. You have to understand why it's important to do. I mean, let's, again, looking at safety, if you don't have your meetings on a consistent basis, you don't train on a consistent basis, people aren't safe, right? Now, there's a little bit more of an incentive, unfortunately, for contractors to be safe. It's not just, the fact that we want everyone to go home safe. There's huge amounts of government fines and other things behind it with OSHA, which, that's not what I'm suggesting here, but you've got other outside motivations, right? So let's talk about, training should be an all well-rounded program in your company. I really think there's a lot of value to our aging workforce that is getting ready to retire, where they can be turned into training managers right inside your company. Okay. I think they want to share their knowledge. The ones that I've talked to, they're in that 60 to 65 range. They want to pass on what they've learned. A lot of roofers that, in the generation I talked about, when we came up, I started out as a union roofer, and that may be more of a dirty word today than it was then. But when you were a journeyman, that's what they called us then, before you could become a journeyman roofer, every system that was on the market, whether it was steep slope or flat, we had to learn to do. I had to learn how to do slate, wood shake, built up. Then when EPDM, other single plies, we had to learn how to do it. We couldn't go around and say, I am a TPO roofer. You weren't a roofer then. You were considered a helper or an apprentice. So I think in your company, you want to have that well-rounded. And you may be a company that only does single ply. So of course you want to concentrate on what you do the most, but you want to train people throughout the entire process. Because again, that goes back to what we talked about career path. Nobody wants to be the one putting screws in all day long, or the one sweeping up around the dumpster with no way around it. So you want to still train them. That's a great opportunity to see where your hidden stars are. Now we're talking about, the roofing part of the training. Then you want to take that time, pull your leadership out of all of that fray, and you have got to dedicate time to teach them how to become true leaders, running their crews, managing projects, understanding the finances behind the projects, understanding budgets and how they work, productivity, and more importantly, start teaching them about efficiency. Efficiency is part of leadership when you're running it. Once you get a crew leader that understands how many hours they really only are productive in a day because stuff is set up incorrectly, or they have to run too much for the material that's on the wrong end of the roof. That's where efficiency comes in. You can only produce so much, but you could be a lot more efficient. They need to learn this. No one learns it. You're not going to learn that in school. I didn't learn it in school. No one, it's just not part of life. You have to teach that. But you got to be consistent with it. It's not just going to be a PowerPoint presentation and they're going to get it. You've got to be dedicated to it. That's where having a dedicated training manager that understands all this, takes the training that's available out there and be able to implement it into your company and make sure they're doing it with follow-up. And again, you have to have the commitment. You got to not feel discouraged if somebody leaves you that you spent money training on. It's just, that's life. People go to other companies and other careers, but in the long run, less people leave construction companies, in which we're part of in roofing, if there is training on how to do the aspects of the job in a career and where we're going. And it is a long game. It's not a short game. It's something that you can't start and be done within a year and go, we're over it. No, it's something that's got to become part of your culture from the day you start it to the day you sell your business or whatever happens, you're done. Basically, you're in. And your culture has to be on training. It has to encourage it. And I do really recommend that you look beyond the obvious in your company and offer these different training programs to other people who may not be in that position in your company, because you're going to find some real golden opportunities that become available that people weren't given anywhere else, right? Especially roofing companies miss the golden opportunity when they have a production side of their company and a service side of their company. They feel like they're in competition. But that is another area that's great as your workforce starts to age or change. You can keep them in your company and move them maybe into a technician position. Again, if you have all this planned out, people aren't going to jump ship and leave. So it's, again, and looking back, Enrico, you got to be consistent, which means you got to do, it's just like having, you've heard me speak on sales and estimating, you got to have that weekly meeting, and it's got to be every week, and you got to drill it home to everybody knows what they're doing, and then you got to continually do it. It's got to be a commitment from the top down, the very top head of that company, all the way down to any one of your supervisors or any one of your admin staff have to believe in it. Because you can't have people running around saying, this isn't really worth it, because that'll kill your program. And longevity, it has to stay. You have to keep it, and you got to go and make training one of your core values. There's no better way in doing it. Everyone should have a core value on training. That should be part of it. Training and leadership.
Right on. I know you get a lot of support in the chat there, John, with your comments. So thank you. So let's talk about the messaging and the right ways to be communicating in your company.
So, communication is so important. We talk about this all the time. If you don't have communication breakdown, if you have a communication breakdown, it doesn't matter where it is. You're usually going to have failure somewhere. Simple as that. So we looked at shared success. That is a great statement there. How often, especially in our field crews, are successes celebrated compared to them being beat up over a job not going well, that very well they may have had zero control over, because it could have been a bad estimate, or it could have been a job the company wasn't qualified to do. And I want to make that clear, because you can't just beat up your field crews all the time. I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but it happens. I've seen it. Believe me, in 45 years of doing that, I saw it a lot. But how often do we really elevate? I love on social media when I see a company have a roofer of the week, foreman of the week, whether it's for safety, quality, production, something they did well in their personal life. That's what keeps people motivated. So share all those successes, share it, right? Addressing issues. I will tell you right now, your crew leaders have zero training and really don't know how to handle issues that pop up onto their crews. They need, we're not looking for them to be psychiatrists or anything like that, or to replace your human resources, but they need to be taught how to handle it. There are going to be fights. There are going to be arguments. There's going to be people that don't want to do what they do. This is a different age we're in today. There are 4 generations working in our industry at the same time, and every one of them has different issues and needs to be communicated to in a different manner. Take the time to teach your crew leaders what to do. It'll pay off in the end. And I'm going to come back to incentive, because we could spend a few minutes on that. Again, it comes down to culture. It's got to be, I've heard a lot of companies say, and this is a great one, I don't mean on safety, but it's what we all know, safety first. And they don't really have good safety training, or they don't enforce the safety, right? Well, that's really not a culture then. You don't have a culture of safety. Having a culture of safety is like having a culture of production or anything else. And when you look at it, should be safety, should be number one, right? You have production, and you have quality, and then you have production, right? Because if you don't have safety, nothing else matters. And if you don't have quality, it doesn't matter how quick or how slow you do anything, you're going to have problems. And then if you get into the production one and you learn how to be efficient and produce, where training comes in to teach them how to be better, you're going to have, that's a culture. So then you can really say that I have a culture of safety, quality, and production. And if you work on those 3 things, you don't have to worry about every year trying to be the #1 sales leader. You're going to make a lot more money on the projects you're on and grow at the pace you want to grow, which will relieve a lot of that pressure of constantly recruiting and trying to have more crews, because your volume continues to grow, right? Remember that volume's controlled by what you can actually produce. Then you get into hiring subcontractors. And from an operations standpoint, I went through that. You've got a whole nother world of hurt when you're trying to manage all this together. So now let's jump back to incentivize. I am a big fan of having a field incentive plan for my roofers, for my crew leaders, for my superintendents, for my project, the whole company. But usually the field gets left out of a lot. Incentive is not a bonus. A bonus is a discretionary amount of money that a company gives to someone because they had a good year or they wanted that. That's like a goodness of your heart. Bonus incentives get mixed up. Incentive is a plan that you take the time to put together that really works, that is not complicated, that your crews can understand. If they do this, they get to earn a little bit more money. What happens with that? You start to cut back on overtime, right? When you step back on overtime, you got more money coming into the company. They're making more, but your quality's better, your production is better, and your safety's better. So you work on a plan. And again, that's a whole nother webinar. I'm not going to get too deep in it, but take the time to figure out how to get an incentive plan in for your field. It is so important.
Thanks, John. I think, one of the things that we want to point out here is that when you have created that culture and your employees see that career path, then they stay, but it also makes it really more appealing for new people to come and join you as well. So it's helping recruitment.
Yeah, it is. Word of mouth is a great one to put there. Right now, the most successful recruitment tool is having your own a referral program to come in. And referral programs can be set up in many different ways. I personally like them where there's an end payout to both the person that recruited and it at a year. I like to see something at 90 days and see you split it up so that you're not just paying it out to get people, turning over in 90 days. But industry statistics show us that when you are recruiting from within with a recruitment program inside your company, you are 66% successful over top of any other way you're doing it. So the majority of companies that have really become good at this, that's how they're getting their people coming in. And you never can run out of it because it's not just family members or friends. You want to get your aces that you're teaching this culture to go speak at their churches, to speak at their schools, right? That, you go to a football game at a high school. What a better place at the refreshment booth to have something about what great our industry is, right? How great the company is you're working for. It works. It works all the time because people want to hear what you have to say if you're there. I've been at XYZ Roofing for 15 years, and here's why I'm there. That's your recruitment. That's how you get it word of mouth. And again, Karen, we talked about this. I will tell you, I work now on my side of the industry. I work with roofing contractors, also in Canada, in the United States, and the really successful ones. I can say, what is your career path? And they may not have it perfect, but they can tell me there's a career path, right? Mm-hmm. And not just say, well, I have a career path, and explain to me how that works. That's the first question I ask for this when we talk about this subject. But there's not enough. A lot of companies think they do, but a career path is not just getting somebody off of the screw gun and onto, running a heat gun or whatever you're doing. A career path is where can I be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years with your company? And you're not promising them, right? Just because I'm a new recruit and you tell me in 15, 20 years, if I can be part of this supervisory team or maybe be on the admin side, what do I have to do to get there? It's a two-way street. I have to work hard. Just because you have a career path doesn't mean I can get there if I don't do everything that you've laid out on there, right? So you got to keep that in mind. Have that education. Start your own university with inside your company, XYZ University. Have it laid out. If you spent $60,000 or $70,000 paying someone to run all these programs within your company and go out there and get all the information that's available through NRCA, other organizations, other companies that provide this stuff, that 60,000 goes away because now you're getting a better workforce and you start to make more money in your bottom line. It's not about sales. It's not about gross profit in the industry. It's about net. That's what this world works off of, is what's left over at the end of the day. I want to jump back a little bit on that career path. I've worked with companies, most employees, if you go in the field, they think you're making a ton of money. That's the first thing they really think. If they've never been educated, if you sell a job for $100,000, they think you're making $100,000, right? Educate them with a dollar bill that, say you make you want to make more than this, but let's just make this easy. 5% net is all your, after taxes and everything else, the company's left over with a nickel out of every dollar. If you start to break that down with change and a dollar bill and say, this is our dollar bill that we brought in, this is what we're spending to get it done, and at the end, I'm left over with this nickel, everyone understands that. And now all of a sudden they got a culture, well, yeah, I could waste a nickel real quick. Maybe I don't want to throw that into the dumpster, or you know what? I'm not going to go hide behind the, why do I want to, why is my crew leader pushing me to make sure that I'm not running down to the bathroom and taking a half-hour nap? I'm using silly examples, but these are things you got to think about.
Yeah, definitely true. And now let's talk about getting started. You mentioned that briefly, that there are some resources out there. And tell us about that. I'm listening to you and I really want to get this going in my company. What do I do?
Yeah. So, let's face it. I know that we're on here. I've seen the comments come accrue. Our National Roofing Association that represents the contractors' interests across the United States is NRCA. They are loaded with resources. And I will tell you, in speaking with plenty of the leadership that works in NRCA, if they don't have what you need, which is going to happen, they will put you in touch with where to get that information or how to find it. So that is your number one great resource. Again, do your research. Now that I've gone in, and again, this is not a sales plug I'm doing here if anybody's listening, but that's why I spent my time learning the roofing industry, succeeding in the roofing industry, doing what I do. Now I'm the opposite. I like to speak, I like to educate first, and then I train. And I have my part of my business that I work with contractors. But what I'd like you to do is to do your research before you work with anyone out there. Find out what they're about, how much they really educate within our industry, and what are the benefits of working with them before you bring them in. Because starting out, with the best intentions, what I mean is there's companies that will claim they can come in and teach you things in your roofing training, how to do furmans. They may be working with outside industries that have nothing to do with what we do, and they don't understand what we do. Mm-hmm. So again, do your research. There's nothing worse than taking that commitment, putting the money and time into it, and find out that you have the wrong training and process. Talk to your peers, find out what they're doing. Don't rush to judgment on this. Go take your time and do your research over 30, 60 days. Find out what everyone's doing, what whether it's positive, negative, what's available. And again, like I said, you can always start just right with the, NRCA is a great resource because they will put you in the right direction if they don't have what you're looking for.
They do. And they offer a lot of things online as well. So if you're not a member, you should be, because you do get access to a lot of that information. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's other people in the roofing business that are doing it already and doing it successfully, as you've seen, John.
Yep. And there's one thing you have to understand out there is you've got multiple generations. They learn differently. You've got to have hands-on portions of your training, regardless what it is. You've got to have visual. You do have to have online, because there are people that only learn online. Mm-hmm. You have to have that mix, right? If you have that mix, you're going to keep all your different generations happy. And I will close on this as far as training goes. Your new generation that's coming up, which is Z, right? I believe that's the newest one coming out. They are a lot more like generations prior. They want to know, they don't want to go from company to company. They want to know a career path. So as that generation continues to flood into the workforce, if you do not have these things in place, you're going to miss the opportunity to capture that part of our, of your generation coming in. So again, there's no better time to start now. And as always, I'll throw this out there. I'm always open to a conversation. If anybody's ever worked with me, I'm not about a sales call when you call me. I will give you pure information, and then you make the best judgments you can for what's good for you.
Yeah, thanks, John. I know there's been a lot of conversation going on in the chat, which is fantastic.
I can't even keep up with this. I'm
I
leaving at
can't
the
either. So if you have your question and we missed it, I don't know, Megan, our producer, has been watching it. Let us know if we've missed any questions. But I want to mention too that, your manufacturers are also a good source of training when it comes to materials and installation. So the resources are out there. And it's important, go to your regional show. The Northeast Regional Show is coming up next week. Florida has a regional show. A lot of these local associations do shows where you can go and learn and see what's available and what you can implement into your business.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. As far as hands-on training, if your company works mainly with manufacturer Y, you need to make sure that your folks are getting trained multiple times a year with that manufacturer on the technique, because it's repetitive. It's bad habits are hard to get rid of, and good habits take time to get entrenched. So take advantage of that. Manufacturers love to train, and a lot of times it's the fact that people just don't ask them to do it.
Right. Right. And there's usually no cost involved in that either. They want to be sure that their systems are being installed correctly and are performing correctly so they don't have problems down the road. And I like your statement there about bad habits form easily and good habits take a while. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you, John, for sharing this information. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, this will be on Roofers Coffee Shop within the next day or so. So if you want to share it with anybody, visit our website, rooferscoffeeshop.com, go to our read, listen, watch section. And we do that on purpose because John, you mentioned people learn in different ways. So we let you read the transcript, we let you listen to the audio or watch the webinar because people do learn differently. So thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next one.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.